Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of Through the Fire and the SBN Small Business Network podcast. I am your host, Ryan Wickline, and today we have a very transformational guest. She is professional speaker, Ms. Laura Bratton. How you doing today, Laura?
Doing great. Thank you, Ryan, for the opportunity.
Hey, I'm glad to have you on here, and I'm ready to watch you transform some lives here today.
Absolutely. That's the goal, right?
Yep. So the number one question everybody's probably wondering, who is Laura Bratton?
So I'll take a very long story and make it short, and then we can go from there. So life was great. Life was normal. Growing up in the Southeast, my mom was a teacher. My dad was in real estate. And then when I was 9, I was diagnosed with a very rare retinal eye disease. So basically, my cells of the retina were starting to die, starting to deteriorate. Even though I received the diagnosis as a 9-year-old, I didn't lose a significant amount of vision until middle school. And then through high school, I went from the vision I had then to what I have now. It was just light perception, absolutely no usable vision. So going through that incredibly different physical adjustment as well as the emotional, mental mindset, that's why I do the speaking and coaching and why I've written the book. So that's a super short summary of a very long, painful experience.
Around what age were you when you started losing your eyesight significantly?
So I was in geography class as a 14-year-old in 8th grade, and the teacher said, take out your notebooks and start copying down the notes on the board. So, as it always done, I took out my notebook and I looked up at the board, and all I could see were these black, blurry blobs. It wasn't shapes, it wasn't defined letters, it was just blobs. So I looked down at my notebook, I looked back up at the board, and that's still all that I saw. So I leaned over to the person sitting next to me and said, how are you copying down the notes on the board? There's nothing to write down. Her answer was life-changing. She leaned over and just casually said, Laura, the print is completely normal. What do you mean you can't copy down the notes on the board? It's like it's always been. That's when I realized I have lost a significant amount of sight. My life up until that point, there were just minor adjustments. But from that moment forward, it was major life adjustments, not reading print anymore, having to learn Braille, and just the whole mindset, emotional process.
Wow. I mean, can you talk about some of the fear you felt at that moment?
So, yeah, absolutely. The fear was overwhelming. Before I even felt the fear, it was denial. My instant emotional reaction was, I'm not going through this. This isn't that bad. It's not going to last forever. By the time I get through high school, this will be all over. I'll just pray my way through this, manifest my way through this, and my vision will magically come back. Once the denial, I worked through that. It was exactly what you said. It was the overwhelming fear of the present, fear of the future, fear of everything and always, all the time. So just that constant fear. And that fear, what that was like in my head was I constantly told myself, I can't do this. This is too much. This is too hard. I don't have the strength. It's too overwhelming. I'm too fearful. The fear was shutting me down. So that was
Wow.
my initial emotional reaction.
So, how would you say your mindset was?
The fear manifested in deep panic attacks, and the overwhelming fear led to deep, severe depression because the fear was just too much. It was too overwhelming for my 14, 15, 16, 17-year-old brain to process. So yes, the fear absolutely manifested in deep anxiety, deep panic attacks, and depression.
I'm sure that transition wasn't easy for you.
Right.
Can you tell us how hard some of it was? Like some of the stuff you had to go through?
Yeah, the hardest part was the grief part. So as I'm a teenager in high school, as I'm trying to get through ninth grade algebra, ninth grade Spanish and English, I'm deeply grieving that I've lost a major part of me, one of my major functions, one of my major senses. I now have to grieve. So absolutely the hardest part of it was grieving what I've lost and knowing a task that now took me forever to do with so much frustration and so much fear. It used to take, when I had vision, it would take 30 seconds with no effort. So that was the hardest part, is that intense grief of grieving grieving the past and knowing how hard the future and the present were.
Hmm. What was your turning point moment where you said that you were just going to go through this and come out better?
Great question. So there was not one moment, one situation that turned that, oh my gosh, I absolutely cannot do this. I don't have the strength that stops that fear. Rather, that turning point was a series of events. It was a series of reactions, that moments that got me to that place of turning, okay, I can't, into, okay, maybe I can. I definitely can do this. So the way that I got to that turning point, those different moments that I described, was not by my strength. It was by the strength of the support around me. So the whole time I'm thinking in my head, I can't. I'm overwhelmed with depression, overwhelmed with fear, overwhelmed with anxiety. Thankfully, I had parents that were saying, yes, this is overwhelming, and we'll take it day by day by day. So every day when I was so overwhelmed with fear, they were reminding me, we will take it day by day by day. If you get up, eat breakfast, get dressed, and get to school on time, that's a huge accomplishment for the day. And another major gift that they gave me that helped my transformation from the fear was they didn't lower their standards for me. I have one older brother, he's 5 years older. So they didn't start treating him one way and me as their disabled child or their other child. They kept those same standards for both of us, just the same. Obviously, they would make accommodations where I needed accommodations, but it wasn't pity. It wasn't, okay, you sit home and do nothing. And a example that I absolutely love to share that illustrates what I mean by this is, one night in my teenage brain, I was about 16 or 17 at this point, I thought in my brain, oh, I can just use this blindness to get out of everything I don't want to do. I thought that was a brilliant teenage idea, right? So when, as one of my chores was to unload the dishwasher, one night after dinner, my mom said, okay, Laura, it's time for you to unload the dishwasher. So in my brilliant 16, 17-year-old head, I said, oh, Mom, I'm really sorry, but I can't unload the dishwasher anymore. I'm blind. And of course, that was a straight face, totally serious. And being a teacher, she turned around and looked at me and said, Laura, unload the dishwasher. And then she just walked out of the kitchen. And I knew that teacher slash mom voice meant unload the dishwasher. It was not asking any more questions. At the time, I was thinking, gosh, you're the meanest mom in the world. You know, my dad heard her say this. He didn't do anything. And I'm thinking, gosh, y'all are the meanest parents ever. That interaction was the greatest gift they could have given me, because what they were teaching me is, yes, you are blind, and yes, you can unload the dishwasher. It might be slower than someone with sight. The forks might be messed up a little bit with the spoons and the knives, but you can unload the dishwasher. So what they were teaching me was yes, you will do it maybe slower, or you need accommodations to do what you need to do, yet you can still do your life goals, your daily goals. Those can still be accomplished. And just through that interaction, of course, I didn't realize at the time what they were teaching me, but it showed me, oh, I cannot use blindness as an excuse. I can't use blindness to get out of the fears that I have in life. Rather, I have to embrace those fears and figure out how to work through it. So that's just one example I love to share that illustrates that was an incredible gift, because it was teaching me you're still you. So it was those moments. It was moments of my brother. He didn't stop treating me as that annoying little baby sister. I still annoyed him and drove him crazy all day long, every day. He was still hoping I would just magically go away and leave him alone. He didn't start babying me as his sister just because I was losing my sight. Friends were still my friends because I was still me. So it was all that support around me that is, I'm overwhelmed with panic and these thoughts of, I can't do this, and so locked down in fear. The community around me, complete strangers, my neighbors, teachers, friends, they were all telling me through their actions, you can do this with accommodations, and just taking it day by day by day, minute by minute by minute. So I share all that to say, again, it was not one specific moment that was the turning point. It was a constant series of events over time, realizing the support I had around me gave me the strength to then have that support for myself.
I love that. I always tell everybody this too, that before you ever start believing in yourself, somebody else is going to believe in you to push you to that next level before you
100%.
ever start believing in yourself.
100%. You said it absolutely perfect. That is so true. And that was my lived experience.
How do you define courage or being courageous?
So if you had asked me that question originally, initially, when going through the blindness, the vision loss, adapting to it, I would have defined courage as just pushing on, ignoring the fear, just sweeping the fear under the rug and keep going. Now, how I define courage is the combination of acknowledging the fear, acknowledging that we feel scared or angry or sad or lonely, acknowledging the difficulty, and then choosing to trust yourself to move forward. So, specifically in my life, it is courage for me on a daily basis looks like acknowledging the grief. Yes, I deeply grieve that I don't have vision anymore like I did. Yet, as I grieve, I can still choose to move forward and have a guide dog that helps me navigate the world. And I can still have goals and dreams and passions. So to me, courage looks like acknowledging the fear, embracing the fear, and choosing to move forward in the midst of the fear.
I love it. How has grit been a source of strength for you?
So that is a great question. Again, just like how I got to that turning point, all those moments of people around me supporting me, they showed me the grit before I had it for myself. So as I shared those examples earlier, all those examples were moments of grit. Then there became that point where I had to accept that grit for myself. People couldn't just always be strong for me. At some point, I had to accept that grit. So the way that I define grit, the way that I've experienced, the way that it looks like for me is acknowledging, yes, this is hard. And I choose to believe in myself for the next hour, for the next day, for the next week, whatever time period that is. Those small moments that I choose to trust, to believe in myself, to have the tenacity, just to keep going for that day. And grit also looks like when I'm overwhelmed with those moments of fear, just sitting with that fear and giving it time to be there and acknowledging this fear is not going to stop me. Just acknowledging the fear is not going to just stop me and prevent me from doing what I want to do. It's acknowledging it and then choosing to trust myself and move forward. So grit for me is those moment to moment moments, the moment to moment, just daily actions of choosing. And it's again and again and again, every day, every moment. It's not just one time I choose to be grit, end of story, but it's a constant decision.
So a lot like discipline then.
Right. 100%. Absolutely.
I love how you talk about gratitude. How has this been a source of strength for you?
So gratitude all started from a brief conversation that I had with a mentor. So again, as I'm in high school and I'm deeply anxious, in panic attacks, depressed, fearful, a mentor of mine said to me, we were having a conversation. At the end of the conversation, she said, Laura, I want you to start writing out every day 3 things that you're grateful for. And I want them to be specifically from that day because I don't want you to repeat. And as she said that, in my southernness, I smiled and said, thank you. In my head, I was thinking, you are a terrible mentor. How in the world are you telling someone that is deeply depressed and anxious to be grateful? That's horrible advice. So just in my stubbornness, just to prove her wrong, I started writing down 3 things I was grateful for. And the one day became 3 days. And the 3 days became a week. And what I realized is she was not saying, be grateful for the blindness, be grateful for the fear. She was teaching me, be grateful for what helps you navigate through the change, through the difficulty. So a real life example, she wasn't asking me to wake up and say, I am so grateful to be blind. She was asking me to wake up and say, I'm grateful to have a guide dog that helps me navigate the world. I'm grateful to have a brother that believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. So again, it's not being grateful for the change, for the difficulty, for the grief. It's being grateful for what helps us navigate through the difficulty, through the grief, so that we can keep going and live out our goals and dreams and just live out every day.
So how did that help with your anxiety and depression and like your fear?
It deeply reduced the anxiety. The panic attacks got less. The depression got less. I was sleeping better at night. The fear wasn't quite as overwhelming because gratitude changed my mindset. So it gave me, I cultivated a mindset over time of, I didn't write down every day 3 things I was grateful for. Rather, just started to be part of my mindset that throughout the day, as events and situations would happen, I would notice that and be grateful. For example, when I was in college, so still in those first, several years of adjusting to blindness, as I was in college and the university, had a student in every class that would take notes for me and I would get double time on tests. Being grateful, having the mindset to say, I'm grateful that the university has this accommodation. Rather than being frustrated that I am blind, being able to say, I'm so grateful that they provide the test in Braille and that I could have a double time on the test. So it extremely helped the anxiety and the depression and the fear because it changed my mindset. It changed my thought pattern to focusing on the depression, focusing on the fear, to now focusing on the gratitude of what I am grateful for.
Awesome. So what's your mindset like today then?
So today it's living out both the grit and the gratitude. Some days my mindset is more focused on the grit where I need to trust myself, believe in myself. Other days it's more focused on the gratitude of being grateful for the joy of each moment, just the joy of those around me. And so it's a constant balancing of the grit and the gratitude. It's a constant back and forth. There's not a beginning or an end. I'm just always using the grit and the gratitude to navigate through each day.
I love that. I think a lot of what people deal with right now, that if they would just take a little bit more gratitude and just start writing down, like maybe 3 to, I used to do 3, I usually do 10, start writing that down, a lot of anxiety would start to go away in a lot of
Yeah,
people's lives.
absolutely. It is such an incredible healing resource. I had no idea how healing and powerful gratitude would be.
What is your advice to others that are experiencing change?
So my advice is to have the courage to just take a moment and realize the change is really, really hard. Oftentimes, I found this in my own life, and I found this in so many people that I work with. We don't take the time to acknowledge the difficulty because oftentimes, again, and I found this for me personally, it feels like if we acknowledge how difficult and how fearful the change is, the change will just, the fear and the change will totally overwhelm us and just shut us down forever. So, my advice is acknowledge the difficulty and then choose to love yourself enough to take that next step. Is that next step sending that difficult email or making that difficult phone call to a family member or to a friend or coworker? Do that one step that can move you forward towards your goal, towards moving through the change, so the change doesn't just paralyze you with fear. And then my other advice would be, and again, I wish I received this advice, was and I not just received it, but actually implemented it. Know that in the midst of change, you are still you. You are still worthy. You are still enough. Because oftentimes the change is so overwhelming for us. We get focused on the change, and that's all we think about. That's all we focus on. We forget that even in the change, we're still us. We are still beloved creations. We are still enough as human beings.
I can't agree more. How much, with that, as you were like to a little bit elaborate a little bit more on that, would you say that, I'm kind of lost at words right now, but of becoming and like are you kind of lose your identity
A
with some of
hundred.
that going through that change?
Yes, yes. Okay. So I'd love to share another story with a mentor that helped me in that identity process. So it was right before I was starting college. It was about a week before my fall semester started, and I was in an administrator's office. And I don't even remember why we were meeting, but at the end of the conversation, she said, "Laura, I just want to let you know, you think that you're done grieving. You think that you grieved through high school, that you're done grieving. Now that you're starting college, you can move on. Your basically your identity has been in kind of grieving, surviving each day, and now you're ready to move forward. I want to let you know, and I want to give you permission that it's okay to grieve the rest of your life. Grieving is not a weakness. Grieving does not mean you haven't accepted your blindness. Grieving does not mean you can't move forward. It just is a part of your new reality." And the reason I share that story is because it was such a huge mindset shift for me in the identity. Because through high school, as you reference, the change is so overwhelming. It's who are we? I'm not sighted anymore, but I'm a blind person. Like that feels weird because I was still in that deep grief place. And blindness means grief. I don't want to be that. But what that conversation gave me was permission to embrace the new identity of I can do both. I can constantly grieve the vision loss while still moving forward. So it's accepting the new normal. and knowing my identity is not victim. My identity is not, person that grieves forever. My identity is me living each day, choosing to be choosing to be courageous. So that I'm so thankful you asked that question, because that's a huge, huge piece of my transformation that helped me move through the fear. Is it's okay to live in both worlds, and that's healthy, and that's healing, and that's just part of our life process.
I couldn't agree more. You started Ubi Global. What inspired you to start a coaching and speaking business?
So the passion for starting that organization was 100% because of my life experience. So as I referenced earlier, I received incredible support from family, from friends, teachers, neighbors. So many different people helped me along the way. I didn't just want to say, I'm glad for that help, end of story. I want to say, okay, now that I've received that support, I want to continue and be that support in this world. So that's why I started the organization for speaking and for coaching, where I speak to organizations, companies, and then work with people individually on how is it that you navigate through change. When you're facing a specific change, what tools do you use, and how can you apply the balance of grit and gratitude to navigate through that change? So my whole passion, my whole drive, the whole reason I created the organization was out of my own lived experience. I wanted to pay forward and to be that support to others that I received in my own experience.
Nice. What kind of services do you provide?
So for the speaking is to mainly corporations and organizations. And again, it's all around companies bring me in to speak when they're experiencing change and their employees are going through change and the leaders are going through change, and they need a guide, just a guidance on how do we navigate this change so that we still reach our goals, so that we still reach our purpose, the point of our company, living out our mission. So that is the speaking part, focusing on helping companies and organizations navigate through change. The individual coaching is working with people one-on-one as they experience personal change. So for example, I work with a lot of people as they go through the grief process, as they're going through different type of non-death losses. So what non-death losses mean is often we consider grief as the death of someone. Non-death losses means it's the death of a part of us. Just like for me, and the non-death loss was losing my sight. So I work with a lot of athletes as they experience injury and difficulty from their athletics, to help them. How do they navigate through that? The fear, the overwhelming fear, to keep going. So I love both the speaking and the coaching, because they both incorporate great gratitude, but on two different levels.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't think anybody in a corporation can argue with you about the change you had to go
Right.
through, and
Right.
can't. I mean, the changes you went through, I mean, should inspire them to face the change that they have to go through with a little bit
Right.
more courage.
Right. And then also the change, and I'm glad you said that, because I forgot to say that. That's a lot of what I also speak on is my change never ends. Yes, I'm through the initial adapting and adjusting, but I still live every single day in a sighted world as a person without sight. So every single day, I have to figure out how to adapt and adjust and have that courage and move forward. So yeah, so it's not just, oh, I went through this change and I moved on. It's no, I still experience the change every single day.
Yeah. What are some of the biggest challenges your clients face?
Fear, fear, fear. Regardless of the situation, regardless of the person's age, I've worked with CEOs who are in their 60s. I've worked with 12-year-olds in middle school, regardless of the age, regardless if they're an athlete in corporation, in high school, in middle school, again, regardless of the situation, is all, I shouldn't say all, but most of the majority is being overwhelmed by fear and asking that question, can I move forward? How do I not allow this major fear to stop me? Can I move forward with this fear? And so that's a large part of what I work with people on, is that mindset, shifting that mindset from overwhelmed with fear, just again, to that grit and that gratitude, so they can acknowledge the fear while also moving forward.
How hard is it to get them to take that first step into the action part?
Incredibly difficult. So what I always tell people is that first action looks like trusting me that I believe in you. Again, before they can take that first step of acknowledging the fear and moving, that next step away, is trusting their support system, trusting me as their coach that I believe in them, that they can move forward from the fear, trusting and pointing out the other people in their life that also are showing them on a daily basis, yes, this fear is hard. Yes, it's overwhelming, and you can move through it. So the first step is having the person acknowledge and trust the source, the strength of the source around them.
Yeah. You wrote the book Harnessing Courage. What inspired you to write it?
So first I want to talk about the title. The reason I named it Harnessing Courage was very specific. So the harness is what I hold. I hold one end and the other end goes around the dog. And so that's the harness that the person who's blind holds for the guide dog to be a guide dog team. So I named it Harnessing Courage to honor and just out of respect and appreciation. I've had 2 guide dogs, just for the work that, and just the unconditional love and just their presence that they were to me on a daily basis. So I named it Harnessing Courage because it took a lot of courage every day to pick up that harness and trust a 60-pound black lab with my eyes. That takes a lot of trust. What if they see that squirrel over there? They still gonna be my eyes. So that's why I named it Harnessing Courage, for the respect and just appreciation. The reason I wrote the book is the exact same passion that was for the speaking coaching. So I wanted the book again to be a source of strength, and not just for people going through blindness, but a source of strength for people navigating through change. So my goal of the book was to write it in such a way that, yes, it's telling my story through the perspective of becoming blind, but I want it to be a book that anyone could pick up as they navigate through change and use it as a resource, as a guidebook to know how to navigate through change.
I love how you named it after the dogs who
Yes.
lead you every day.
Yes.
I mean, like I said, I think you're such an inspiration to show that no matter what cards you've been dealt, you can still accomplish whatever you want to in life.
100%. 100%.
What was the hardest thing you had to overcome while writing your book?
Again, the grief process, because that brought up so many emotions as I wrote. So I wrote the book in 2016, or it was published. I wrote it in 2015, published in 2016. So by that point, I had been through most of the most difficult process of adapting and adjusting. But writing my story, it was deeply healing. And it was also hard to realize how much I'd been through, realize the deep fear, the true fear, the overwhelming fear. So it was healthy and hard all at the same time, because it was healthy to write it and get it out on paper, but yet it was hard to bring back up all those raw emotions from the past. So it was healing and hard all at the same time.
I bet. I mean, it kind of gives you a different kind of perspective, like looking back and like showing the progress you made from how
100%.
like how far you've come from when you started to where you were when you wrote the book.
Yes. And that was the healing part. Yes. It was incredibly healing to realize how much I have navigated through the change and how much I have worked through the fear. And it also gave me a lot more self compassion as I wrote the book and reflected back, because it made me realize how hard life has been and yet how I've had to choose every day to keep going. So that helped me as I reflected back to have deeper self compassion, to have deeper self love for myself and just how hard life has been.
What advice would you give to somebody out there who is maybe struggling with like being compassionate with themselves or even loving themselves?
What I say to every single person that I work with individually is the way that we, and this is again from my lived experience and all my studying in psychology and all my work and research academically, the way that we can develop self compassion and self love is to first think about, what would I say to a friend? As a friend is overwhelmed with fear, what would I say to that friend? And for me specifically, again, if I had a friend who was going through vision loss and she was anxious and panic attack and depression, I would not say to her, suck it up, get over it, move on. What are you upset about? You know, I would say, how can I support you? I'm here with you in it. So we're so quick to offer that compassion and love and respect to our friends, yet when it comes to ourselves, we're so harsh and critical and judgmental. So the best advice I give, and again, this comes from my own lived experience and working with people, is realize the self-compassion, or the not the self-compassion, the compassion and the love that we give to our friends. How can we then give that self-compassion to ourselves? Be that compassion to ourselves.
Yeah, I love that advice. I think that so many of us are so hard on ourselves at times,
Yeah.
and the way we talk to ourselves so harshly, I mean, that leads to a bad mindset
Yes.
completely.
Yes, that leads to overwhelming, fearful mindset, you know?
Yeah. How important has personal development, and upgrading your mindset been for you on your journey?
So it's been extremely healing. And what I've learned is focusing on the personal development is not something we do one time when we read one book or listen to one podcast or take one course. Personal development is constantly over our life, and when I say over life, over the journey of our life. So it's not something we can do one time 10 years ago and say, oh, I did that 20 years ago, or I did that one time for 1 month. Rather, it's that constant rolling process. So, again, for example, in my personal life, I can't just say, well, I could, but what I've learned through mentors and through life experience, not to say, oh, I did that personal development thing 10 years ago, so I'm good to go. Rather than every day, every month, every year saying, how can I focus on my personal development today? Do I need to give myself more self-compassion or more self-love? So knowing that it's a process that we constantly work on. It's not a 6 month trial period and then we're done with our personal development, but it's an ongoing process of loving ourselves and offering that self compassion. And then for me, living out the grit and gratitude.
What is one book you'd recommend for personal development or mindset?
I love, love, love. Well, can I give two?
Yep, go for two.
I immediately thought of one and then another popped in my head. So I love, love, love Tuesdays with Maury. And that story, and the reason I love that is because that story is all about what we have reflected on of it's it's one person supporting another person. So it is so great for personal development because it models through a real life story of someone going every Tuesday and being with a friend and just being with him in the pain and yet believing in him, trusting in him, and the gift that that gives to his friend as he's going through such a difficult situation. So it perfectly models that someone believing in us when we don't even believe in ourselves, and showing that empowerment that we can develop through someone living with us in the pain, not just saying, oh yeah, hope it goes well for you. Which a lot of people do. The,
Yeah.
the other book that I absolutely love and I would recommend, and that I've read many, 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 many times. I don't even know how many times I've read it. And that very much helps me with mindfulness is The Power of Now. And The Power of Now is all about teaching us mindfulness and how do we live in the present now? How do we live and cultivate a mindfulness that is not overwhelmed by the future or not stuck in the past, but focuses on the present? If the present is painful, feeling that pain and continue going. If the present is joyful and full of laughter, embracing that, being grateful for that, and moving forward. So those are two books I highly recommend that have been transformative for me.
What would you say for somebody who is asking you, how do I live in the present moment and the here and now?
Yes. So that is all through the gift of mindfulness. So mindfulness is a practice that I honestly didn't think it would work, or I didn't realize how powerful it was. I didn't think I needed it or it would be helpful. But once I took a course in mindfulness and was completely transformed from my fear, I realized the gift of learning that our thoughts are thoughts. Our thoughts are not permanent. Our thoughts are not forever. Our thoughts are not concrete. So, again, in a fearful moment, when I would be overwhelmed with fear, my thinking in the moment was concrete, was saying, okay, because I feel fearful now, I will always be fearful in every situation for the rest of my life. Mindfulness taught me and teaches me to acknowledge, okay, yes, I'm fearful. Yes, I'm feeling that fear. I can acknowledge that and then let that thought go. So mindfulness taught me the ability to realize our thoughts are just that, fleeting thoughts. They're not permanent, set in stone events. And the other gift that mindfulness taught me was a common practice in the mindfulness world is the body scan. So noticing, are you tensing your shoulders? Are you clenching your fist? Are you holding your stomach in really tight, like in a nervous, tense, stressed way? Just relaxing your body, relaxing your hands, relaxing your muscles so that physically you're not so fearful, you're not so intense with stress. So mindfulness has been deeply, deeply healing for me. And I use mindfulness every day with people I work with individually.
Awesome. What are your short-term and long-term goals?
So my short-term goal is to continue every day to choose courage. Some days that's no problem and I can do that with ease. Other days it's absolutely exhausting. And I just want to say, okay, no more of this courage thing. So my short-term goal is just that every single day to choose that courage to continue moving forward on a mindset level. My long-term goal on a personal level is just continue to focus on that personal development, to know that's an ongoing everyday process. Professionally, both my short-term and long-term goal looks like continuing to do the speaking and the coaching because I am so deeply passionate about both and absolutely love both. So those are my goals to grow in the speaking and grow in the coaching because I love empowering others with resources to navigate through their change, through their fear.
I love those goals. How can people get a hold of you?
The best way is through my website. So laurabratton.com has all the information about speaking, coaching, my book, everything is on the website. So that's the best place.
Is there anything we haven't covered that you want to talk about?
The only other thing I would love to make sure to mention is that, again, grieving is a process that we go through. It's not an event that we have to do and then move forward. That was incredibly freeing and gave me so much permission, because again, I thought grieving was a state of being, it was something we just did and then we were through it and we moved on. So I say that to say, know and trust and believe. Again, I said this before, but just to reiterate, that we are enough as we grieve, as we go through change, that we have gifts and purpose and matter to this world.
I couldn't agree more. Final question. What is one piece of advice you'd like to leave our listeners with about overcoming adversity?
Trust yourself. In deep times of change, the change can be so overwhelming and so difficult, and we can be overwhelmed with fear that it takes all of our energy, all of our emotional strength, all of our physical energy. It's exhausting, mind, body, and spirit. So my advice would be to trust yourself and know that you are worth it. And again, to know that that you matter even in the midst of the change.
Nice. Well, Laura, I can't thank you enough for coming on here and sharing your story with all of us. Like I said before, I think you're truly inspiration to everybody.
Thank you for the opportunity. I appreciate being here.
Well, guys, that's going to be all the time we have here today. Remember, the only way to get what you want is to go through the fire.